Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I am John Ramdeen. He is Robin Black, and José Aldo, the UFC interim champion, still making headlines. It seems that he really wants out of his current UFC contract. He is not happy with the way the UFC has handled this entire Conor McGregor-Eddie Alvarez situation. José Aldo feels that he's been lied to, he's been promised things, those promises have been broken. Now it seems that he just wants to walk away from the sport, not even join another organization. However, I'm not sure I still believe that. I think that, you can just retire. We've had this conversation before. He doesn't need a contract, he doesn't need anything, just like George St-Pierre. Nobody's forcing George St-Pierre to come back to the sport of mixed martial arts, despite the fact that he does have a number of fights still left on his current UFC contract. For José Aldo, if he's tired of things, he can just walk away, right? He
can, and he can also just say he's walking away and come back 18 months later. The guy's only 30 years old. Yeah. It's interesting when you look at it, because this makes me admire José in a lot of ways, especially if you wondered if he still had passion to fight. He does. If you've ever freaked out on a business partner, on a friend, on your bandmate, or at work, it's because you care. Because you're passionate and you feel helpless, and that is something most people have felt. And when that happens, there's a couple things you can do. Not care anymore. A lot of people do that. They wander through life not caring anymore. Or you can sometimes freak out because you care enough. What you learn eventually is that you cannot control the boss or your wife or your bandmate or your business partner. You can only control what you do. And I think that's what José is going to ultimately decide here. He may go away for a while because he's angry, man. He's emotional and he cares and he's passionate and he's pissed off. So he'll probably go away for a little while, and about 18 months later he'll calm down and he'll think, hey, I'm José Aldo. I can beat all these guys. There's twists and turns in this thing all the time. I can't control how business is run, and he'll probably come back.
How much does the financial landscape of the UFC, how do you feel that impacts the fighters right now? Because it seems to me that because the word is out, the UFC getting sold for $4 billion, it feels now more than ever that the fighters want their piece of pie. And it seems like this might be a tactic by José Aldo and his team to say, look, hey, we've been fighting for a small amount of money over the course of our career.
He's made millions.
I'm sure. But when you look at the grand scheme of things and look what the numbers the UFC is doing, because if you compare it to boxing, and if Floyd Mayweather, when they're selling 1 million pay-per-views, somehow he's able to make $50 million from a show, you would imagine that some of these MMA fighters, it's like, wait a second, the math just isn't adding up here. We all deserve a raise, and we know the UFC can afford to pay us an insignificant amount when you look at the grand scheme of things.
Maybe so, but when you look at the scenario, if you own the company and you think Conor's going to cost you $20 million more next year, and you think if George is coming back, that's $10 million, and you think Ronda's going to cost you $10 million, like so many other things in the world right now, you're pushing all that raises, all that money, you're setting it aside for the big stars. Al Iaquinta, I love that guy. I want to see that guy fight. I'd like to see Al Iaquinta get paid more money, but if they're looking at it going, oh my God, Conor's going to cost us so much, we better skimp on these guys. That sucks for them. But when you're comparing money too, there's two of my very favorite fighters. You have to compare how they're looking at it. Eddie Alvarez, George St-Pierre. Eddie Alvarez is like, I'm going to make a couple $1 million, and I want to fight. I want this guy. I believe I can beat this guy. This is a defining fight in his amazing career. He's like, whatever. This is how much I said. With the pay-per-view, it'll be $2 million. Let's do it. George, on the other hand, and that argument of whether George wants to fight or not, George wants to fight if the money and the right scenario. Alvarez is just like, let me fight that guy. I think I can beat that guy. Couple $1 million, I'm not greedy. Both are fair. As you watch it, you can be either of these people in your life. You can say, I'll hold out for the most, or you can say, I love what I'm getting to do. I don't need to be greedy. And what did Chris Weidman tell you?
Yeah, and that's it. He didn't sign his contract because he knew he was going to have to beat Anderson Silva not once or twice. And after beating him the second time, he understood, actually, after beating him the first time, he got to renegotiate his contract, and he knew the way he was going to get that money is go out and do your job. And it's probably the same situation with Eddie Alvarez. You go out, you beat the biggest star in the game, although Dana White says that Ronda Rousey is the biggest star in the game. It seems to me that Conor McGregor is currently the biggest star in mixed martial arts right now. So for Eddie Alvarez, you go, stop the hype train, and does he sign another contract if he becomes, I guess he doesn't get the 145-pound champion.
You become the biggest deal going, the money just takes care of itself. I'll tell you, man, think about this. Think about being Chris Weidman. Think about it. You know, they're saying, and I don't know what the number is at that time, let's say it was double what you already got. Chris, sign a new contract to fight Anderson Silva. You're going to get double what you get. No, I'm going to beat Anderson Silva, and then I'm going to get 5 times what I get. But if you lose, you've lost that double. I'm not going to lose. That's a mentality, man. That's one of the reasons we admire Chris Weidman and always will. And Eddie Alvarez, my guy's walking into this fight like that. I don't have to argue over a couple $1 million. What does that even mean, by the way? That's a lot of money. You don't have to argue over that. He's like, I'm going to beat the guy everybody loves, everybody's talking about, everybody's following. He believes he's going to win. And then let's talk scratch.
Now, when you mentioned the name George St-Pierre, and we've all heard the rumors out there that he wanted to take this fight with Conor McGregor for $10 million. The UFC turned him down. Now, we don't know if that's an actual number, but let's just say that it is. You can understand why a guy like George St-Pierre, who has cemented his legacy in mixed martial arts, has established himself as the greatest welterweight to ever compete in the game, he's done everything he needs to do. He's fought the biggest names, the toughest guys, so it makes sense that he decides to walk away. But when the opportunity is here, like we're talking about right now, with all of this new money coming in, why wouldn't the UFC offer George St-Pierre $10 million, considering you're saying, well, we've got Ronda here, we got to pay her, we got to pay Conor. This is who you're reserving the money for. You're reserving it for the big stars. And we were talking about UFC in Toronto that's happening in December. Well, who's going to fight on that card? Is it going to sell a lot of pay-per-views? People are saying, well, George St-Pierre's coming back. The whole USADA testing thing, he's back in the pool. We're going to see it. Are we going to see it? Is the UFC going to up the ante and say, you know what, we know we have a current contract with you. We know that you're worth way more than that. So in order to entice you out of retirement, we're going to pony up and give you some more money.
Yeah, I mean, we're missing a lot of information, but it makes sense. But, you know, all I was trying to compare with Eddie and George is one of the greats ever. George, when he left, we were like, George, don't bother, man. Like, you made the money. You're one of the greatest ever. You've avenged your only losses. You're a superhero for life. And so that's when he was talking about coming back. We're like, you're coming back out of the desire to compete, the desire to fight. You missed the martial arts. You missed that.
Come back for those reasons.
Yeah, and with those, Adam, we're making up numbers. But let's say somebody says, I know you want those reasons. Here's $6 million. No, I need 7. That doesn't tell me that some. Eddie Alvarez doing the opposite. Chris Weidman did the opposite. Now they're at different stages of their career. George, come back. If you want to. No, don't. I don't know, man. I don't know. If I were you, I wouldn't at all. But if you really love fighting, don't argue over half a zero and a point decimal and carry the 2.
But shouldn't they worry about those things? Shouldn't they? When you look at the landscape of things and what this sport does to fighters, doesn't an extra $100,000, doesn't that mean something?
$100,000 would change the life of every person in this room, So it's hard to forget that, or you need to remember that. It's $50,000 is a lot of money to every single person watching these fights.
Coming up this weekend, it's a huge rematch. Tune into FN this Thursday at 7 p.m. as we get you set for all the action going down in Manchester, England. It is the rematch between Michael Bisping, the middleweight champion, and the one and only Dan Henderson.